Hi everyone, and welcome to the next class. Today we are going to be digging deep into making mountains out of molehills. We're going to be looking at some of the more specific beliefs that can create a lot of stress and troubles for you in terms of dealing with the challenges of everyday life. Now, we've already covered a lot of the basics around cognitive behavioral therapy in the previous videos, and today we're really going to drill down on some of the more specific beliefs. So specifically, today we're going to be looking at a type of belief called catastrophizing, where we make a bad thing into a terrible thing, and by the end of the session today, you're going to be able to see whether you have this type of thinking or not, and if you do, we're going to give you the tips and the tools to help deal with it. So let's get started. Now, it was Aristotle, the famous Greek philosopher, who said that you can take events lightly, moderately, or catastrophically. And what he meant by that is, look, there's no doubt about it. Life is difficult. Life is painful. There are a lot of challenges that we have to face, a lot of very difficult challenges. The question is, how do we deal with those situations? It's up to us whether we let them affect us and how much we let them affect us. We can't really control external reality. We can't control what happens to us, but we do have a say in how we respond to it, how we deal with it. Now, have you ever heard of the phrase making mountains out of molehills? In cognitive behavioral therapy, we have different terms for this. We might call it catastrophizing. We might call it magnifying. Other strange words like orphalizing. It's where we take something which is bad and difficult and we turn it into something which is the end of the world, which is the worst possible thing, which is a catastrophe. Now, we might use different words. Those might not be the exact words that we use. We might say it's ruined or it's just the worst possible thing. But essentially that's what we're doing. We're taking something that is this bad and we're turning it into something which is far, far worse. And we all do it. So for example, you might say to yourself, if I were to lose my job, well, it would be the end of the world. As if losing your job would be the worst possible thing for you at that time. We might say, if I fail my exams, it's going to ruin my life. It's another example, you see. We take one particular thing and we say that if that were to happen, then it would be a disaster. It would be the worst possible thing. Now, if you're going to be thinking that, imagine how you're going to be feeling. If you genuinely believe that something is that bad, how do you think you're going to be feeling in the run up to that event? And if it does happen, how are you going to be able to deal with it? It could be anything. Imagine that you are online and you're worried about whether someone likes you or not. Maybe you're saying, if they don't like me, it would be awful. Now remember, we've got all of those rigid beliefs that we've looked at in the previous session. I must not make any mistakes. If I do make a mistake, it'll be a disaster. Maybe you're saying, I need my friends to like me. If I don't, it'll be the end of the world. I don't know what your thing is. Like, we all have something specific that we might be fearful of, but just see right now and see if you have that kind of similar language in some of the difficulties you're facing with. Now, at the moment, hopefully you guys are working on your own specific issues, your own specific things. And whatever it is you're afraid of, if it were to happen, do you think you might be telling yourself something like, this is the end of the world, this is the worst possible thing? So here's the thing, if you put 10 people in the same situation, would they all think the same way? If 10 people failed their exams, would they all think it was the worst possible thing? If 10 people lost their job, would they all think it was the worst possible thing? If 10 people got divorced, would they all think this is the end of the world? And the answer is no. Like, not everyone thinks the same way, and not everyone thinks that would be the worst possible thing. What seems bad to us, what seems like the worst possible thing to us, doesn't necessarily mean that's a universal truth. It doesn't necessarily mean that is the case all the time. So, okay, now we're going to get to the good bit. Let's begin to question this belief. If you do have this type of thought, let's break it down. So, here's the first question. Is it really the worst possible thing? On a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 is not a bad thing at all and 10 is the worst possible thing, where is it on that scale? Now look, here's the thing. Really bad things do happen, right? There's no doubt about it. But most of the stuff that we get stressed about and worried about isn't as bad as we think it is. So when things are going bad, we might really be thinking, well, that's a 10 out of 10. That really is the worst possible thing. But when you put things in a bigger scale and the bigger scheme of life and the challenges that we all have to face, the things that we're all afraid of, where does this problem sit for you on that scale of 0 to 10? Is it a 10? Is it a 7? Is it a 5? How bad is it? And this scale, we could basically say this is a badness scale. Not bad, a little bit bad, and really the end of the world. So begin thinking about your problems and put them on a scale. Where is it in the overall scheme of things? Now, most of the time we realize when we do this that things aren't as bad as we think they are. In that moment when we're feeling emotional, we may react, we may explode. But the bigger picture, it's not as bad as we think it is. Now, we're not saying it's good. We're not trying to help you be positive. We're just helping you to be realistic about how bad something is. So imagine, for example, that it's not a 10 out of 10, but it's a 5 out of 10. It's quite bad. Now, if it's a 5 out of 10, how might you talk about it differently? You're not going to say this is the end of the world. You're not going to say this is the worst possible thing. You're not going to say it's totally ruined. You're going to say, okay, well, this is quite bad, but it's not awful. Or you might say, this is unpleasant, this is reasonably bad, I don't like it, but it's not as bad as I thought it was. Can you see the difference? You're creating space so that it's not such an extreme thought. Realistically, you're bringing more awareness to how bad something actually is. So look, as I said, we're not telling you to be positive. This isn't saying, look, everything's okay, be positive, because that's not the case. Things are difficult, but the secret is learning to be realistic about how bad they really are. What does the damage, what really creates the pain, is when we say this is the worst possible thing. That is where things become more extreme and more difficult for us. When we can be realistic about how bad it is, it becomes easier for us to process, easier for us to deal with. And the truth is, there isn't just good or bad, right? There are many different shades. And there's not just one type of bad, there's many different shades of bad, many different shades of discomfort that aren't at the extreme. And the secret is to get more nuanced about the type of difficulty and discomfort that you're dealing with. Okay, so here's the next question. Ask yourself, if I have this belief that it's the end of the world, it's the worst possible thing, it's a catastrophe, is that really helping you? If you're telling yourself this is the worst possible thing, what effect is that having on you? Is that helping you move away from your goal? Is it helping you move towards your goal? Is it helping you feel more relaxed? Or is it helping you feel more stressed? Now, when we tell ourselves this stuff, when we talk to ourselves this way, we generally make ourselves feel worse. It's not helpful. Remember in the last video where we look at the costs and the payoffs, what is the cost to you thinking this way? So we're starting to get a clearer sense of how this works. This is just one of the different types of ways of thinking that we can disturb ourselves. We don't do it all the time, but we do it some of the time. So let's summarize. Now you know how to identify this type of thinking. And if you do have this type of thinking, the secret is, first thing to ask is, what evidence do you have? Is it true? Is it totally true? And if it's not totally true, what is close to the truth? If it's not a 10 out of 10, what is it? A 5 out of 10, a 4 out of 10, a 3 out of 10? That's the first question. And the second question is it helpful? Is this belief helping you? Is it helping you move forward or move backwards? Okay, good work. That's all for today. We're going to be looking at some more beliefs in the next few videos. I'll see you later.